They never really left. 9 Hollywood legends who still haunt their graves. What if death wasn't the end? What if some souls are so powerful, so unfinished, so deeply tied to the world they left behind, that they simply refuse to go? Across the city of Los Angeles, behind iron gates and polished marble walls, lie the graves of Hollywood's greatest icons. But here's what nobody tells you about some of these places. The people buried there, they don't always stay quiet. Security guards who have spent decades working the night shift at these cemeteries will tell you. Off the record, and with eyes that have seen things they can't explain, that certain graves carry an energy that no amount of time seems to settle. Tonight, we're going to walk through 9 of those graves. 9 final resting places where something extraordinary continues to happen. Something that no one has been able to fully explain. Stay with us, because what you're about to hear is going to change the way you think about the line between the living and the dead. Let's start with the most iconic name in this story. In a quiet, unassuming cemetery tucked between apartment buildings and a college campus in West Los Angeles, there is a simple marble crypt that draws more visitors than almost any other grave in the country. It belongs to Marilyn Monroe. She died in 1962 under circumstances that have been debated ever since. And according to the people who work at that cemetery, the guards who walk those grounds alone at 2 in the morning, the staff who have spent years among those marble walls, her crypt is one of the most active locations any of them have ever encountered. A security guard who has worked night shifts there for over 15 years put it simply. Most famous graves get flowers and visitors. Hers is different. Even when the gates are locked and the grounds are completely empty, there is a presence near her crypt that doesn't go away. It stays. It lingers. And doesn't feel like nothing. The reports are remarkably consistent across people who don't know each other and have never compared notes. Visitors describe sudden, sharp drops in temperature directly in front of her crypt. Cold spots that appear without any logical explanation, even on hot summer afternoons. But that's not the most startling part. The most startling part is the perfume. Dozens of unrelated visitors, including people who knew nothing about Marilyn Monroe's personal preferences, have suddenly paused near her crypt and asked the same question. Does anyone else smell perfume? The fragrance they describe matches the signature scent she wore throughout her life. It drifts through the air with no visible source and no rational explanation. A tour guide who brings groups there regularly says it happens at least once a month. Someone brand new, someone who did no research, smells it and asks about it completely unprompted. The overnight guards, though, have experienced something even more unsettling. Multiple staff members interviewed separately over many years have described hearing sounds coming from inside the wall where her crypt is located. Soft sounds. Muffled. Some describe it as quiet crying. Others say it sounds like someone speaking in a low voice just below the threshold of comprehension. One longtime guard, a former military man, according to the cemetery's own administration, submitted his resignation the morning after one of these experiences. He refused to work nights again. His only explanation was that some sadness is too private to witness. Paranormal researchers who have studied the site offer a theory that feels deeply connected to who Marilyn Monroe was as a person. She was terrified of being alone. She craved connection throughout her life and rarely found the lasting peace she was looking for. She died in isolation, under circumstances that still generate serious questions. If any combination of factors could create what researchers call persistent spiritual energy, that combination, unresolved endings, emotional longing, and an abrupt, controversial death, would be it. The energy near her crypt has been described consistently as unsettled, not threatening, not aggressive, just deeply, endlessly searching for something it hasn't found yet. And Marilyn is just the beginning. Because just a few miles away, in one of Hollywood's most famous cemeteries, something equally persistent has been reported for nearly 100 years. Rudolph Valentino was the greatest romantic star of the silent film era. He was Italian-born, devastatingly handsome, and capable of conveying passion on screen in a way that made audiences around the world fall completely in love with him. He died in 1926 at just 31 years old, and the public grief was so intense that his funeral drew riots. Women fainted. Crowds surged against barriers. The mourning was unlike anything Hollywood had seen before or since. And according to those who work near his grave today, it's as if he never fully accepted that the show was over. The reports around Valentino's grave fall into 2 distinct and fascinating categories. The first involves a woman in black. Shortly after his death, a mysterious veiled woman began appearing at his grave to leave flowers. Her identity was never confirmed. The tradition she started has continued, in various forms, for nearly a century. But here's what makes it strange. Security cameras at the cemetery have occasionally captured footage of a dark-clothed figure approaching his grave during hours when the grounds are completely closed. When guards go to investigate, no one is there. But fresh flowers are. The second category involves the figure himself. Night shift workers over multiple decades. People who don't know each other, who were interviewed at different times and different years, have described the same thing. A dark-haired man in period clothing wearing what looks like a cape or long coat, moving through the garden areas near Valentino's resting place with deliberate, purposeful strides. When approached, the figure disappears. The descriptions are extraordinarily consistent. Medium height. Dark features. Clothing from the 1920s, the posture and movement unmistakably graceful. Most often seen near the anniversary of his death in August. The electrical disturbances in that area are well documented among the staff. Lights flicker without cause. Camera batteries drain in minutes. Doors open and close in the mausoleum when no air current is present. Maintenance crews have checked the wiring, examined the doors for drafts, and searched for every rational explanation. The phenomena continue regardless. Workers have begun joking, affectionately, that he's still making dramatic entrances. Given everything else reported there, it doesn't sound entirely like a joke. We are barely halfway through our list, and already the pattern is becoming clear. These aren't random, shapeless ghost stories. Every single haunting we've covered bears the unmistakable fingerprints of the person it's connected to. Cold and longing at Marilyn's crypt. Theatrical and romantic at Valentino's grave. As we continue, the pattern only deepens. And some of what's coming is far darker than anything we've discussed so far. If these stories are reaching something in you, if this kind of history gives you chills and makes you think, please share this with someone. Pass it along. Because we're just getting started, and what's ahead is even more extraordinary. At the same cemetery where Valentino rests, there is a crypt belonging to a man whose haunting could not be more different in character. Clifton Webb was one of Hollywood's most elegant and exacting screen presences. He played cold, intellectual, supremely judgmental characters with such precise skill that audiences weren't sure whether to admire him or be slightly afraid of him. Near his crypt, visitors and staff don't report visual apparitions or dramatic sounds. What they report is a feeling. A very specific, very uncomfortable feeling of being watched, of being evaluated, of someone standing directly behind them even when no one is there. What makes these accounts particularly compelling is the pattern that seems to trigger them. Multiple people have noted that the sensation intensifies when someone nearby makes an error about Webb's career, gets a film title wrong, misidentifies a role. The feeling of being observed sharpens, as if something nearby noticed the mistake and quietly disapproves. For a man whose entire life was defined by meticulous attention to detail, whose core personality revolved around maintaining exacting standards, that continuation feels almost too perfectly appropriate. Psychics who have conducted investigations near his crypt describe receiving impressions of a consciousness concerned above all else with legacy, with being remembered correctly, with ensuring his contributions aren't diminished or forgotten. Unlike spirits connected to trauma or sudden death, the presence at Webb's crypt feels, by all accounts, like a deliberate choice to remain, an act of will from someone who refused to cede control of his own narrative. Now we travel to a different cemetery entirely, and to a haunting with quality unlike any other on this list. At Forest Lawn in Glendale, inside an ornate mausoleum filled with elaborate monuments and stained glass, there is a crypt with no name on it, no inscription, no identification of any kind. It was specifically requested that way by the man buried there. Lon Chaney Sr., the legendary silent film actor known as the Man of a Thousand Faces. Chaney was perhaps the greatest physical performer in Hollywood history. He transformed his body completely for every role he took, often inflicting genuine pain on himself to achieve the right look. He wanted no name on his tomb because he believed his work should speak for itself. But that deliberate erasure of identity seems to have created something deeply restless in that mausoleum. The activity doesn't stay near a single point the way most grave hauntings do. It moves. Security guards and maintenance workers describe hearing sounds throughout the corridors. Low groaning, the shuffle of uneven footsteps, whispers that seem to follow visitors just out of sight. The detail that makes investigators take notice is this: the footsteps are consistently described as slightly irregular, as if whoever is walking has some physical impairment, as if one foot doesn't quite land the way the other does. That precise detail matches the physical performances Lon Chaney was most famous for. Characters with altered gaits, with bodies that move differently than everyone around them. People who know nothing about Cheney report those same specific footsteps. And then they learn who is buried there. And the color drains from their faces. The cameras malfunction in specific corridors. Batteries die mid-investigation. Photos taken in certain hallways come back distorted in ways that have no photographic explanation. The man who made his entire career out of transformation and disappearance seems, in death, to still be transforming and disappearing. Never settling, never still, always just at the edge of what can be seen or heard. Keep following us through these stories. Because the next grave involves a mystery that was never solved. A death that was officially explained, but widely disbelieved. And a haunting so specific, so tied to the circumstances of that death, that it's almost impossible to dismiss. At a modest cemetery in Altadena, there is a simple grave marker bearing the name of George Reeves, television's first Superman. He was found dead from a gunshot wound in 1959. The official ruling was suicide. But the circumstances surrounding that night have generated serious, credible questions for decades. Competing theories about murder or accidental death have never been fully resolved. And near his grave, the phenomena that visitors report are extraordinarily specific. Multiple independent witnesses, people who visited the cemetery not knowing who was buried there, have described hearing a sudden, sharp, isolated sound near his marker. A single loud crack, like a gunshot, followed by complete silence, followed by something else. A sensation across their shoulders and back. Brief, physical, unmistakable. The feeling of heavy fabric moving quickly past them, like a cape being drawn across their upper body. For a man whose most iconic image was a flowing red and blue cape, the connection is impossible to ignore. The unresolved nature of his death, the unanswered questions that have followed him for over 60 years, seem to have created an energy at his grave that paranormal researchers describe as actively seeking resolution. Not peaceful, not settled. Still searching for something that was never found. And then there is the case that may be the most uniquely strange on this entire list. In 1932, a young actress named Peg Entwistle climbed to the top of the Hollywood sign and jumped. She was 24 years old. Her career had not gone the way she hoped. Her body was eventually returned to Ohio, where she was buried. And yet, she never seems to have left California. Near the Hollywood sign, hikers and park rangers and tourists have been reporting the same sighting for decades. A young woman in light-colored clothing from the 1930s, moving with visible distress, pacing, searching for something before vanishing. The witnesses who report this sighting often have no idea who Peg Entwistle was. They describe what they saw. They go home. They research the sign's history, and they discover that what they describe matches her exactly. At her actual burial site in Ohio, thousands of miles away, small stones left by visitors are repeatedly found rearranged into deliberate patterns. Lines, circles, shapes that couldn't be explained by weather or animals. Something is moving them. A consciousness divided between the place where her dreams died and the place where her body rests, still reaching across the distance, still unable to come to rest in either world. What Peg Entwistle represents is something darker than a single ghost story. She represents every young person who ever came to Hollywood with everything they had, gave it completely, and was turned away. Her haunting is not just personal. It feels like a message from everyone whose name the industry forgot. Back in West Los Angeles, not far from Marilyn Monroe's crypt, there is a niche containing someone whose story deserves to be far better known. Thelma Todd was one of the most brilliant comedic actresses of the 1930s. Sharp, beautiful, full of energy and talent. She was found dead in her car in December of 1935. The official cause was carbon monoxide poisoning, ruled accidental. But the evidence surrounding her death pointed in directions that investigators were either unable or unwilling to follow. Organized crime connections, business disputes, personal conflicts with powerful men. The case was closed far too quickly and far too conveniently. Near her niche, the energy is not mournful. It's not melancholy. It is, according to everyone who has described it, angry. Cold spots that follow people rather than remaining stationary. The sensation of being watched from close range, being confronted rather than observed, faces appearing in reflective surfaces. Glass, polished marble, phone screens. Always seen from the corner of the eye, always disappearing when looked at directly. Always matching her distinctive features. Electronic equipment drains around her niche at a rate that researchers find almost impossible to explain. Full battery charges gone in minutes. The energy communicates, according to every medium who has investigated the site, one overwhelming impression. Something unjust happened here. And it has not been addressed. She is still trying to tell us what it was. Thelma Todd's haunting connects to a pattern that runs through Hollywood's entire history. Young women with immense talent. Suspicious deaths. Official rulings that closed cases before all the questions were answered. Powerful men whose interests were protected while the women involved were dismissed, diminished, or had their reputations destroyed posthumously. The anger near her grave doesn't feel like one woman's frustration. It feels like something larger, a wound that has never properly healed. In another famous Hollywood cemetery, there is a grave connected to one of the entertainment industry's earliest and most damaging public scandals. Virginia Rappe was a young actress who died in 1921 following a party thrown by one of the biggest comedy stars in the world. Her death ignited a media firestorm that destroyed careers and fundamentally changed how Hollywood managed its public image. The truth of what actually happened to her was quickly buried beneath competing narratives. Her reputation attacked to protect more powerful interests, her humanity reduced to a headline. At her grave today, visitors report sounds of sobbing that have no visible source. Cameras malfunctioned specifically near her headstone while working perfectly everywhere else. An overwhelming wave of sadness, not general unease, but something specific and targeted, washes over people who stand there, sometimes so intensely that they have to leave. Even people who knew nothing about her history, who wandered over out of curiosity, have been overcome. The grief seems to reach out and grab hold. It doesn't feel like a haunting. It feels like someone desperately trying to be seen. Trying to be recognized as a human being, not a cautionary tale, not a punchline, not a prop in someone else's story. And finally, in the same grand mausoleum where Lon Chaney's unnamed crypt rests, there's a bronze door bearing a single name, Harlow. Jean Harlow was Hollywood's original blonde bombshell. She was magnetic, funny, genuinely talented, and dead at 26. She died from kidney failure at the absolute peak of her fame, her body worn down by an illness that was treated too late. Just a few years before her death, her second husband had been found dead from a gunshot wound in their home 2 months after their wedding. His death was ruled suicide. Like so many other convenient rulings in these stories, it was never fully believed. In front of Harlow's crypt, a cold spot exists that cemetery staff describe as one of the most precisely defined they have ever encountered. Not a gradual temperature change. A distinct sharp boundary, like stepping through an invisible wall into a refrigerated space. Fixed in place. Permanent. Unexplained. Visitors hear the sound of high heels on marble in an empty corridor. The clicking approach, the movement around the crypt, the retreat. When no one is walking, people feel sudden nausea and difficulty breathing in her immediate vicinity. Sensations that directly mirror the symptoms of the illness that killed her. And researchers who have investigated both her crypt and the home she shared with her husband report similar phenomena at both locations. As if a consciousness is still moving between the two places, still processing something left unfinished between them. A life that ended mid-sentence. A career cut off with so much still to say. As we step back and look at all 9 of these stories together, a pattern emerges that is impossible to ignore. These are not random, generic ghost stories. Every single haunting bears the precise signature of the individual at its center. Marilyn Monroe's crypt carries her longing and her fear of being alone. Valentino's grave holds his theatrical grandeur and unfinished passion. Clifton Webb remains watchful and exacting. Lon Chaney keeps shifting and transforming. George Reeves lingers in the unresolved space between justice and silence. Peg Entwistle drifts between the dream and the grave. Thelma Todd burns with righteous anger. Virginia Rappe reaches out from beneath the weight of a story that was stolen from her. Jean Harlow moves between spaces as if she still hasn't said goodbye. Whether you interpret these experiences through a spiritual lens, a psychological one, or simply as the powerful collective weight of human grief and unresolved history. What these 9 graves have in common is this: the people buried there left too much unfinished. Too many questions without answers. Too many stories that were taken from their control. Too many endings that never felt like endings. And so the energy lingers. The presence remains. The cold spots and the perfume and the footsteps and the faces in the glass continue, year after year, reported by unrelated witnesses who have no reason to invent anything. Hollywood built these people into legends. The world poured enormous emotional energy into who they were. And maybe, just maybe, that energy doesn't simply disappear when a heart stops beating. Maybe some connections run too deep to be severed by something as simple as death. Maybe some stories refuse to end just because someone decided to write the final page. The next time you walk past one of these places, or any place where something powerful once happened, pay attention. Not just to what you can see, pay attention to the air, to the temperature, to the feeling at the back of your neck that says quietly but clearly that you are not entirely alone. If this journey through Hollywood's most haunted graves gave you chills, made you think, or moved you in any way, please like this video and share it with someone who loves history, mystery, or the stories that refuse to stay buried. And if you want more content like this, make sure you're subscribed and have notifications turned on, because the next story we're bringing you is just as extraordinary. We'll see you there.